Let me start with a question. Who are you? No, not your name, not your degree, not where you come from, but who are you really? It sounds like a philosophy, but surprisingly, science has been trying to answer it for a long time. And for decades, one answer seems incredibly convincing: DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, that tiny biological code inside almost every cell of your body. The thing that determines why some of us have curly hairs while others are having the straight ones, why some people are tall while others are short, and why certain diseases run in the families. DNA is extraordinary. In fact, if we scratched out a DNA from a whole human being, it could travel billions of kilometers. And somehow, along the way, we begin to believe the bigger that maybe DNA does not just explain how we look, maybe it explains who we are. You have probably heard people say things like, "That's how I am." Maybe it's in my genes. He was born that way. And honestly, it makes sense because something is written in our biology feels permanent, predictable, and unavoidable. But the more I look into the science, the more one question stayed with me. If DNA explains who we are, then why human beings are so unpredictable? Why do people with similar background become completely different? Why do some people transform after failure, loss, and struggle? And perhaps most fascinating of all, why do even identical twins who share almost exactly the same DNA sometimes grows into remarkable different persons, different beliefs, different habits, different fears, and sometimes even different health outcomes? Same biology, different lives. And that is where the story became much more interesting because DNA, as powerful as it is, does not actually work the way many of us imagine. We often think of genes as instruction carved into the stone, as if biology came with a fixed script and enters in our life. We often think that science tells us something. Yes, it does. It does tells us that your DNA matters a lot. It influences your physical traits, your temperament, and the conditions you would likely to develop in the future. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, influence is not the same thing as destiny, and that distinction matters. Because somewhere between our life and our genes, something else enter into a picture: experience, the environment we grow in, the people around us, stress, nutrition, education, responsibilities, failures, opportunities, and all of these interact with biology in such a way that we are still trying to understand. There is even a field of biology called epigenetics, which studies how environmental factors can influence certain genes. Now, this doesn't mean your DNA magically changed or your genes won't disappear, but it does mean that your biology is way more dynamic. Think of it like this: DNA may provide possibilities, but life influence which possibility should unfold. And I find that idea deeply fascinating because it challenges a very old idea, the idea which we somehow already discussed, described, and defined. Think about how often people reduce themselves to situations like this. I'm not naturally confident. This is how I am. I am just an anxious person. What if this isn't the full story? What if who we become is not only shaped by what we inherit, but also what we experience? What if identity is not something fixed, but something continuously unfolding? And now, to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, this is not me saying that biology doesn't matter. It absolutely does. We cannot ignore genetics. Some people genuinely face biological challenges and problems. Science mattered too much for us to pretend otherwise. But I also think there is something equally important. Human beings are more complex than the biology alone. We are shaped. We are shaped by our conversations. We are shaped by the heartbreaks. We are shaped by the relationships. We are shaped by the kindness. We are shaped by the books. And we are shaped by the communities. And most importantly, we are shaped by the moments we never planned before. And somehow, all of these things leaves marks on us. Not the visible one, but the real one. And maybe this is why human beings are so difficult to predict. Because we are not just simply the product of code, we are continuously responding to life, adapting to it, changing to it, and becoming it more and more interesting. And I think there is something hopeful about that. Because if identity were only DNA, then growth would feel impossible, change would feel meaningless, and perhaps many of us would spend our life believing we are trapped by our biology we inherited. But science does not tell us this story. Science tells us much more interesting story, a more human story, one where biology matters, but so do the experience, one where gene influences but does not completely imprison us, one where human means living somewhere between what we inherit and what we experience. And so, are we more than our DNA? I think science has already given you the answer. Yes, not because DNA is unimportant, but because DNA, as powerful as it is, seems to explain where we begin, not entirely where we end. And maybe the real question was never, am I only my biology? But maybe the better question is, what becomes possible when biology meets life? Thank you so much.